I'm going to tell you something that happened on a station called Verth'Call about 6 years ago now. And I know how it's going to sound. Like something pulled out of a war novel. Like fiction. But the thing about the galaxy is the strangest stories are almost always the true ones. My name is Torin Vasek, Sergeant First Class, Terran Expeditionary Corps, attached to the 9th Diplomatic Security Detail. That's a fancy way of saying I babysat politicians and dignitaries on stations where nobody particularly wanted humans around. And for 3 weeks in the winter cycle of Standard Year 4418, I was assigned to protect a princess I had never heard of, on a station I had never visited, in a part of the galaxy where humans weren't feared yet. They would be by the end. Let me start with the station, because you need to understand the place to understand why everything went the way it did. Verth'Call sat at the intersection of 4 major trade corridors in the Shale Expanse. Not a military installation, not a colony hub, a diplomatic platform, neutral ground, maintained by the Concord of 12, which was this loose coalition of species that had been managing galactic affairs since before Earth had electricity. The station was enormous. Not in the way human stations are enormous, all function in hard angles and recycled air. Verth'Call was built like a cathedral crossed with a garden. The ceilings in the main thoroughfare were 60 meters high, layered with bioluminescent vines that shifted color based on the time cycle. The air smelled like rain and copper, and something floral I could never identify. Walkways floated on anti-grav rails between towers of polished stone and living crystal, and everywhere you looked, there were species I had only read about in briefing packets. Selvari with their mirrored skin and 4-jointed arms. Drenith merchants, squat and scaled, haggling over cargo manifests in voices that rumbled like distant thunder. Pale, willowy Thessic diplomats gliding past in robes that seemed to be woven from liquid metal, and dozens of others, maybe 30, 40 species, all occupying the same space, all operating under the Concord's neutrality laws. Humans had been in the galactic community for about 90 years at that point. A blip, nothing. Most species had been spacefaring for thousands of years, some for tens of thousands. We were the newcomers, the curiosity. Some species treated us with a kind of amused condescension. Others were more cautious. A few were openly hostile. But mostly we were ignored. Background noise, too young to matter. That was the perception anyway. I arrived on Verth'Call on a transport shuttle with 4 other members of my detail. Corporal Jenna Mack, a combat medic who talked too much and shot better than anyone I'd ever served with. Specialist Davy Corin, our tech and comms man, quiet and methodical. Private First Class Yale Ortiz, youngest of the group, nervous as hell but sharp. And Warrant Officer Sable Eddings, who had 15 years on me and eyes that never stopped moving. 5 humans. That was our entire security detail for the assignment. We'd been told the posting was low risk, a diplomatic function, some kind of summit between member species of the Concord. Our job was to provide a visible Terran security presence for a dignitary who had specifically requested human protection. The dignitary was Princess Kalin Servethani, 3rd daughter of the Sovereign of Ildrith. Now, I didn't know much about Ildrith at the time. Briefing packet gave me the basics. Ildrith was a mid-tier power in the Shale Expanse, old civilization, respected but not dominant. The Verth'Call were the ruling family, had been for something like 1,200 years. Kalin was the 3rd of 4 daughters, which in Ildrethi succession meant she was the one who handled foreign relations, the diplomatic face of the family. She was 26 in standard years. She'd been educated at 3 different interstellar academies. She spoke 11 languages. And she had, for reasons nobody had fully explained to me, requested a human security detail instead of using her own Ildrethi royal guard. That fact alone should have told me something was wrong. We met her in a reception hall on the station's upper tier. The room was wide and domed, walls lined with something that looked like mother-of-pearl but shifted colors when you moved. Ildrethi attendants stood along the perimeter, tall, slender beings with skin the color of twilight and eyes like polished amber. They wore formal robes in deep blue and silver, and every single one of them looked at us like we'd tracked mud into a temple. Princess Kalin stood at the center of the room. I'd seen images of Ildrethi before, but images don't prepare you. She was tall, nearly 2 meters, with that same twilight-colored skin, but hers had a faint luminescence to it, like she was standing in light the rest of us couldn't see. Her hair, if you could call it that, was a cascade of fine, dark filaments that caught the light and scattered it into tiny prismatic sparks. Her eyes were gold with flecks of violet, and when she looked at you, you felt it. Not like being scanned or assessed, more like being acknowledged, like she saw exactly who you were and had already decided to be kind about it. She was, without question, one of the most striking beings I had ever seen. She was also clearly terrified. She hid it well. Royal training, I assumed. Her posture was perfect, her expression composed, her voice steady when she greeted us. But I'd spent 12 years reading body language across a dozen species. The micro-tremor in her left hand. The way her pupils contracted slightly when footsteps echoed from the hallway. The almost imperceptible tension in her jaw. This woman was scared of something specific. "Sergeant Vasek," she said. Her voice had that Ildrethi quality, musical, layered, like 2 tones harmonizing at once. "I appreciate the Terran Corps responding to my request." "It's our honor, Your Highness," I said, "standard protocol." She studied me for a moment, then quieter. "Do you know why I asked for humans?" "I didn't. Our briefing indicated you preferred a non-conquered security presence for the summit." A small, careful smile. "That's the diplomatic answer. I'll give you the real one." She glanced at her attendants, then back at me. "I asked for humans because you are the only species in this quadrant that cannot be bought, bribed, or intimidated by the people who are trying to kill me." The room got very quiet. Jenna shifted her weight behind me. I heard Sable's breathing change. "Your Highness," I said carefully, "our briefing described this as a standard diplomatic protection detail." "Yes," she said, "it was written that way on purpose. If the true nature of the threat had been included in formal channels, the people I'm afraid of would have known I was taking precautions." She paused. "Sergeant, I have reason to believe that an assassination team has been dispatched to Verth'Call. I believe they are already on the station, and I believe they intend to kill me before the summit concludes." I looked at Sable. She gave me the smallest nod. Her hand was already resting on the sidearm under her jacket. "Who?" I asked. "The Vess Syndicate," Kalin said. "Operating on behalf of a faction within my own government that does not want the summit to succeed." The Vess Syndicate. Even I'd heard of them. They weren't a species. They were a network, multi-species, decentralized, extremely professional. They handled the kind of work that governments needed done but couldn't be seen doing. Assassinations, sabotage, strategic eliminations. They'd been operating for centuries. Their success rate was, by all accounts, nearly perfect. And they were here, on this station, coming for the woman standing in front of me. 5 humans against the Vess Syndicate. I should have been afraid, and I was later when I had time to think about it. But in that moment, standing in that pearl-walled room with a frightened princess, telling me the truth that nobody else would, what I felt wasn't fear. It was clarity. "All right," I said, "tell me everything." She told us over the next 2 hours, seated at a table in her private quarters while her attendants stood watch outside. The quarters were elegant but modest by royal standards, curved walls, soft lighting, a wide viewport that looked out at the nebula surrounding the station. Kalin sat with her hands folded, speaking in that measured, layered voice, and she didn't leave anything out. The summit was about trade route access through a contested region called the Myrth Corridor. Ildrith had been negotiating with 3 other species for shared passage rights. a deal that would have opened enormous economic opportunities for all parties involved. But a powerful faction within Ildrith's own ruling council opposed the deal. They wanted exclusive control of the corridor. They saw shared access as weakness. And Kalin, as the lead negotiator, was the face of the agreement. Remove her and the deal collapses. Her father, the sovereign, was old and ailing. Her eldest sister managed internal affairs and had no interest in foreign policy. The second sister was military and openly sympathetic to the opposition faction. The youngest was still a student. Kalin was the only one holding the agreement together. "I've received 3 warnings in the past month," she said. "Encrypted messages from sources I trust. Each one said the same thing. The Vess have been contracted. They will act during the summit when security is diffused across multiple delegations and the station's own defenses are spread thin." "Why not cancel?" Davy asked. "Reasonable question." "Because canceling is exactly what they want," Kalin said. "If I withdraw, the deal dies. My people lose a generation's worth of economic progress. The opposition faction gains control of the council within a year. I have modeled every scenario. The only path forward is to attend, negotiate, and survive." "And you chose humans to protect you," I said. "Yes." "Why?" She looked at me then, and for the first time, some of the royal composure cracked. What I saw underneath was exhaustion. Bone-deep weariness. This woman had been carrying this weight alone for weeks. "Because I researched every security force available through official and unofficial channels," she said. "The Vess have contacts within conquered security. They have informants among the Selvari Guard Corps, the Drenith Protection Services, and at least 2 of the independent military contractors operating in this region. They have a reputation for turning an enemy's own protectors into weapons." She paused. "But they have no contacts among humans. Your species is too new, too insular, too difficult to compromise. And your soldiers," she hesitated, choosing her words, "your soldiers have a quality that other species lack." "What quality?" Jenna asked. Kalin looked at her. "You bond," she said simply. "Other species protect assets because of contract, duty, or honor codes. Humans protect people. Once a human soldier decides that someone is under their protection, truly decides it, they become remarkably difficult to stop. I have studied your military history. Your soldiers have a pattern of behaving irrationally when someone they are protecting is threatened. They ignore self-preservation. They exceed tactical expectations. They become obstinate." "Obstinate," Sable repeated, and I could hear the faint smile in her voice. "I mean it as the highest compliment," Kalin said. "The Vess Syndicate has never failed because their targets were always protected by rational actors, professionals who understood acceptable losses. Soldiers who would calculate odds and withdraw when the math turned against them." She looked at me. "I need protectors who will not do the math." And in that moment, I understood exactly why she had chosen us. Not because we were the best trained, not because we had the best equipment, not because we were tactically superior to every other option. Because we were the ones who would die before we let them take her. And she knew it. We set up our security protocol that night. The summit was scheduled to last 5 days. 5 days of negotiations, formal dinners, bilateral meetings, and public appearances. 5 days of exposure. 5 days where Kalin would be visible, accessible, and vulnerable. We couldn't lock her in her quarters. The whole point was that she had to be present, had to negotiate, had to be seen. So we adapted. Sable took point on planning. She'd done diplomatic protection before, and she was terrifyingly good at it. She mapped every route between Kalin's quarters and the summit hall. She identified choke points, blind spots, and emergency exits. She established check-in protocols with 15-minute intervals. She coordinated with the station's own security grid, carefully, without revealing the specific nature of the threat, to ensure we had access to surveillance feeds. Davy hacked into the station's environmental systems, not to control them, but to monitor them. He set up alerts for any unauthorized atmospheric changes. Gas attacks were a known Vess tactic, and tapped into the communication network to scan for encrypted traffic patterns that didn't match known diplomatic frequencies. Jenna prepared medical kits for 7 different categories of injury, including 3 types of toxin exposure common to Vess operations. She also quietly acquired a secondary weapon from a contact on the station's lower levels. I didn't ask where she got it. I didn't want to know. Yale, despite being the youngest, turned out to have a gift for something invaluable: pattern recognition. I put her on surveillance analysis. She spent hours watching the feed from public areas, identifying individuals who appeared in multiple locations at multiple times, tracking movement patterns that deviated from normal foot traffic. And me, I stayed close to Kalin. Not just physically. I studied her schedule, her habits, her mannerisms. I learned the way she moved through a room, always gravitating toward the left side, always keeping her back to a wall when possible. I learned which attendants she trusted completely, 2 out of 9, and which she was uncertain about. I learned the rhythm of her speech, so I could tell when she was calm and when she was performing calm. On the second night, she asked me why I kept watching her. "I need to know what your baseline looks like," I said, "so I can recognize when something changes." She considered that. Most security personnel focus on the environment, threats from outside. "Threats come from everywhere," I said, "including from changes in the person you're protecting. If your behavior shifts, if you suddenly become tense or distracted or move differently, it might mean you've seen something I haven't." She tilted her head, that Ildrethi gesture that meant she was reassessing something. "You really do bond," she said quietly. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. The first 2 days of the summit were quiet. Too quiet, Sable said. She didn't trust it, neither did I. The negotiations were complex, multiple species arguing over transit rights, tariff structures, patrol responsibilities. Kalin was brilliant at the table. Watching her work was like watching a master musician. She read the room instinctively, knew when to push and when to yield, spoke each delegation's language and understood their cultural pressure points. Several times I saw her diffuse tensions that were moments from collapse, steering conversations with a precision that would have made our own diplomats weep with envy. But every time she returned to her quarters after a session, she sat down and her hands shook. She never let anyone see it except me, and I only saw it because I was looking. On the evening of the second day, Yale flagged something. "Sergeant," she said, pulling me aside in the corridor outside Kalin's suite. Her voice was tense. "I've been watching the feeds. There's a Thessic maintenance worker who's appeared on the upper tier 12 times in the last 30 hours, each time near a different junction point. He's not following a work route. He's mapping the corridor layout." I felt my stomach tighten. "Show me." She pulled up the feeds on her handheld. There he was, a Thessic in standard maintenance coveralls, moving through the upper tier with the casual unhurriedness of someone who belonged there. But Yale was right. His movements weren't random. They were systematic. He was walking the same routes we would use to move Kalin to and from the summit hall. "Have you cross-referenced him with the station's maintenance roster?" I asked. Davy did. There are 6 Thessic on the maintenance staff. None of them match his biometric profile. Not maintenance, not authorized, mapping our routes. "How many others?" I asked. Yale's face told me the answer before she spoke. "I've identified 3 more possibles. A Selvari who's been sitting in the same observation lounge for 9 hours without eating or drinking. A Drenith who arrived on the station 4 days before the summit with no listed purpose of travel. And," she hesitated, "one of the princess's attendants, the tall one with the scar on his neck. He stepped out of the quarters at 300 last night and was gone for 47 minutes. He went to the lower levels." Davy tracked his comm unit. He made a 30-second encrypted transmission. One of her own people. My blood went cold. I told Kalin that night. I didn't sugarcoat it. She deserved the truth. She listened. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She sat very still for a long time, and then she said, "Veshin. The attendant's name. He's been with my household since I was a child," she said. Her voice was flat, not emotionless, controlled, the kind of control that comes from practice. He taught me to ride. He was at my naming ceremony. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "Don't be sorry," she said. "Be ready." I looked at her. This woman who was 26 years old, who should have been living a life of privilege and comfort, who was instead sitting in a room on a foreign station being told that someone who had helped raise her was plotting her death. And she wasn't breaking, she was sharpening. "We can handle Veshin," I said, "but if he's their inside contact, we have to assume they know our protocols, our routes, our schedules. Then change them." "We will, but I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Trust me, completely. When things go wrong, and they will, I need you to do exactly what I say without hesitation, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it scares you." She studied me with those golden violet eyes. "I already trust you, Sergeant," she said. "I have since the moment you said, 'Tell me everything,' instead of 'This isn't what we signed up for.'" Day 3. Sable rebuilt our entire security plan overnight. New routes, new timings, randomized patterns. We didn't remove Veshin. If we did, the Vess would know we were onto them and accelerate their timetable. Instead, we fed him false information. Davy created a shadow schedule, a convincing fake itinerary that showed Kalin taking different routes at different times than she actually would. We let Veshin see it, let him pass it along. Meanwhile, the real schedule existed only in our heads. No digital records, no written notes. 5 humans carrying the princess's survival in their memories. The summit continued. Kalin negotiated, we watched. And Yale kept tracking. By midday on day 3, she had identified 2 more operatives. A total of 6 confirmed or probable Vess agents on the station. 6 that we knew of. There could be more. 6 professional assassins against 5 human soldiers on an alien station, with limited resources and no backup. The math was terrible. I didn't do the math. That evening, something happened that I still think about, still replay in my head when I can't sleep. Kalin had a formal dinner with the Servethani delegation. Standard diplomatic function, long table, elaborate food, ceremonial toasts. I was posted at the wall behind her chair, close enough to reach her in 2 steps. Jenna was by the door. Sable was in the corridor. The dinner was unremarkable until the 3rd course, when a Servethani delegate named Koran made a comment about human security forces. He said it in Servethani, probably assuming none of us understood. He was wrong. I'd spent 6 months learning basic Servethani before my first posting. What he said, roughly translated, was, "The princess brought pets instead of guards. How charming." A few of the Servethani chuckled. Kalin didn't laugh. She set down her utensil, this elegant, crystalline fork-like thing, and responded in flawless Servethani. I only caught part of it, but the room went silent. Later, I asked one of her trusted attendants what she had said. The attendant's translation: "Delegate Koran, I have seen your guards train. Impressive choreography, truly beautiful to watch. My humans are not beautiful. They are not elegant. They do not move like dancers. They move like something that has decided you will not touch what belongs to them. I chose function over aesthetics. You may judge whether that was wise after this summit concludes." Koran didn't make any more jokes. Day 4. Everything changed on day 4. It started at 600 station time. Davy woke me with a hand on my shoulder and 3 words: "They're moving." I was up and armed in 40 seconds. Sable was already in the corridor. Jenna was checking her med kit. Yale had the surveillance feeds running on 3 handheld displays. The fake Thessic maintenance worker accessed a utility junction on the upper tier 20 minutes ago, Davy reported. He was there for 6 minutes. When he left, the atmospheric sensors in Corridor 7 Alpha went offline. Corridor 7 Alpha, the primary route to the Summit Hall. The Selvari in the observation lounge relocated to the lower concourse at 5:30, Yale added. She's sitting near the emergency transit hub, blocking a retreat path. And Veshin left the quarters again at 4:45, Sable said. He didn't come back. They were positioning, setting up their operation, and they were doing it on the fake schedule, which meant they thought the morning session would follow the route through Corridor 7 Alpha. They were wrong, but they didn't know that yet. How long do we have? I asked. If they're operating on the shadow schedule, they think the princess moves at 800, Davy said. That gives us about 2 hours. The real session starts at 8:30, I said. We adjusted to Route 9 Gamma. They shouldn't know about it. Shouldn't, Sable repeated. Her tone said everything. I went to Kalin's quarters. She was awake, dressed, standing by the viewport looking out at the nebula with her hands clasped behind her back. When I entered, she turned, and I saw that the fear was gone from her eyes. Not replaced by courage, exactly. Replaced by resolve. The look of someone who has accepted what's coming and decided to face it standing. Today, she asked. We think so. She nodded, one small, precise nod. What do you need me to do? Stay close to me, move when I move, stop when I stop. If I tell you to get down, you get down. If I tell you to run, you run. And if you can't tell me anything, then follow Sable, if not Sable, Jenna, if not Jenna. I understand the chain, she said, quiet, steady. I looked at her. This princess from a world I'd never visited, whose people I barely knew, whose language I couldn't speak. This woman who had put her life in the hands of 5 strangers from a species most of the galaxy considered insignificant. Your Highness, I said, I want you to know something. Regardless of what happens today, you are going to walk into that summit hall. You are going to negotiate your treaty, and you are going to walk out again. That is not a hope. It is not an aspiration. It is what is going to happen. She looked at me for a long time. I believe you, she said. And the way she said it, I can't explain it properly. It wasn't the polite affirmation of a diplomat. It wasn't faith or optimism. It was recognition. Like she was looking at me, and seeing something in my eyes that confirmed what she had suspected about humans all along. That when we say someone is under our protection, we aren't stating a policy. We're making a covenant. We moved at 8:15. Route 9 Gamma took us through the station's secondary commercial district, a wide, open concourse lined with vendor stalls and trade offices. It was busy at that hour. Crowds of merchants and diplomats moving between levels. Noise, color, movement. Good cover and terrible sight lines. I was at Kalin's right shoulder, Sable at her left, Jenna 3 meters ahead clearing path, Yale behind us watching our 6. Davy was in the comms room we'd commandeered, monitoring feeds and coordinating. We were halfway through the concourse when Davy's voice crackled in my earpiece. Vasek, the Dreneth just entered the commercial district, west entrance. He's moving toward you. My hand found Kalin's arm, gentle but firm. I guided her 2 steps to the right, putting a structural column between her and the west entrance. And the Thessic, I asked. Lost him. The feeds in Section 4 are still down. Lost him, that was bad. Sable, you heard. Heard, adjusting. Sable shifted her position, widening her coverage angle. Her hand was under her jacket. We kept moving. Jenna picked up the pace slightly, creating distance ahead of us to draw attention forward if anyone was watching. The old trick, make them look at the point person, not the package. 30 meters to the corridor junction, 20. Then Yale said very quietly, contact rear, 2 unknowns matching pace. I didn't look back. Description: Thessic, both of them, not the maintenance worker, new faces, light coats, hands concealed. 2 more. The Vess had more people than we'd counted. My heart was hammering now, but my hands were steady. There's a thing that happens in those moments. I've heard other soldiers describe it, and it matches my experience. The world narrows. Everything irrelevant falls away. The noise of the crowd, the colors of the stalls, the smell of alien food gone. All that exists is the threat, the principle, and the space between them. Davy, I need a path, something narrow. Somewhere we can control the approach. Service corridor B12, 15 meters ahead on your right, single file width, exits into the diplomatic wing. Copy. I leaned close to Kalin. When I squeeze your arm, we turn right, walk fast, don't run. She didn't nod, didn't acknowledge, just kept walking, her face serene, her pace unchanged. Perfect composure. God, she was brave. 15 meters, 10, 5. I squeezed. We turned. The 4 of us, Kalin, Sable, Yale, and me, slipped into the service corridor like we'd been heading there all along. Jenna stayed in the concourse, continuing forward, making it look like the group hadn't split, buying time. The service corridor was narrow, maybe 1.5 meters wide, lined with conduit pipes and access panels. Low ceiling. Dim lighting. Our footsteps echoed on the metal grating. Behind us, I heard the footsteps of the 2 Thessic change cadence. They'd seen us turn. Move, I said. We moved. The corridor bent left, then right, then opened into a wider maintenance hub, a circular room with 4 exits and a ceiling bristling with pipe junctions. I pulled Kalin to the far wall and put my body between her and the corridor we'd just come through. Sable, take east exit. Yale, south. I've got west. Davy, where does the north exit go? Directly into the diplomatic wing, level 3, 50 meters to the summit hall. That's our path, but we hold here until... The first Thessic came through the corridor entrance. He moved fast, faster than I expected. Thessic are lean, long-limbed, and they move with a fluidity that makes them look boneless. He had a weapon in his hand, a compact energy blade, the kind that can cut through light armor. His eyes found Kalin immediately. And then they found me. I don't know what he saw in my face. I don't know what expression I was wearing, but he hesitated, just for a moment, a fraction of a second where his forward momentum stuttered. That was his mistake. I closed the distance in 2 steps and hit him in the throat with the heel of my palm. Not a killing blow, a disabling one. He staggered, choking, and I grabbed his weapon hand and twisted. The energy blade clattered to the floor. I drove my knee into his midsection and put him down. He hit the grating hard. The second Thessic was right behind him. She was faster, better prepared. She had a projectile weapon, small, suppressed, designed for close quarters work. She fired as she entered the room. The shot went wide, not because she missed, because Yale tackled her from the side. Yale, who was 22 years old, who had been nervous on the transport shuttle, who hadn't fired a weapon in anger since basic training. She came from the south exit at a dead sprint and hit the assassin at full speed, driving her into the wall. The weapon discharged into the ceiling. Sparks rained down. Yale wrestled the gun away with a ferocity that I hadn't known she possessed, and then Sable was there, pinning the assassin to the ground with practiced efficiency. 2 down in maybe 8 seconds. I was breathing hard. My hand hurt, I'd struck bone. The first Thessic was groaning on the floor trying to stand. I put my boot on his chest and pressed. Stay down, I said. He stayed down. Davy status. Jenna's in the concourse. She says the Drenith broke off when you entered the service corridor. He's heading toward the lower levels. The observation lounge Selvari. Still at the transit hub. And Veshin. Silence, then, still unaccounted for. Veshan, the inside man, the one who knew Kalin's habits, her tendencies, her instincts, the one she had trusted since childhood. I looked at Kalin. She was pressed against the wall, eyes wide but standing, not cowering, standing. Her hands were balled into fists at her sides. "We need to move," I said. "North exit." "Now." We moved through the north corridor toward the diplomatic wing. Sable stayed behind to secure the two assassins, zip-tying them with restraints she'd been carrying since day one. That left three of us with Kalin, me, Yale, and Davy on comms. The diplomatic wing was different from the rest of the station. Higher ceilings, better lighting, more security checkpoints. Conquered guards were posted at intervals, tall Selvari in ceremonial armor that was mostly decorative. They watched us pass with curious expressions but didn't interfere. 5 humans moving fast with an Eldrethi princess. Unusual but not technically a violation. 50 meters to the summit hall. 40. 30. Davi's voice. "Vasek, I'm picking up a comm burst. Same encryption signature as Veshan's transmission. It's coming from inside the diplomatic wing." He was here ahead of us. I stopped. Kalin stopped with me. Yale positioned herself behind the princess, scanning the corridor. "Where exactly?" I asked. "I can't pinpoint it. Somewhere in the next 30 meters, between us and the summit hall." 30 meters. A dozen doorways, 2 corridor junctions, and several alcoves between here and there. Any one of them could be hiding a man with a weapon, and inside knowledge of exactly who he was waiting for. I thought about what Kalin had said. That other species would do the math, would calculate odds, assess risk, make the rational decision. I turned to Kalin. "Stay with Yale. Don't move from this spot until I come back or Sable arrives." "Sergeant." "Trust me," I said. That was our deal. She closed her mouth. Her eyes were frightened, but she nodded. I moved forward alone. I'm not going to pretend what I did was tactical genius. It wasn't. It was a soldier walking down a corridor looking for a man who wanted to kill the woman behind him. Simple as that. No grand strategy, no elegant maneuver. Just forward, one step at a time. The corridor was quiet. The summit session wouldn't start for another 10 minutes. Delegates were still in their quarters or in the reception areas. The hallway was empty except for the faint hum of the station's environmental systems and the distant murmur of voices from the hall ahead. I checked each doorway as I passed. Most were locked private meeting rooms sealed for the summit. I pressed against each one, listening. Nothing. 20 meters. 15. Then I heard breathing. It was coming from an alcove to my left, a recessed area designed for maintenance access, partially hidden by a decorative column. The breathing was controlled, deliberate. Someone trying to be quiet, someone waiting. I drew my sidearm. I stepped around the column and found myself face to face with Veshan. He was tall even for an Eldrethi. His skin was darker than Kalin's and the scar on his neck was vivid in the corridor's light. He held a weapon, not Eldrethi standard issue, something sleeker, foreign, Vess manufacture. It was aimed at the corridor behind me, at the path Kalin would have walked. He saw me, and everything happened in a single heartbeat. His eyes widened, the weapon shifted toward me, and I saw something in his face that I hadn't expected. Grief. This man wasn't a fanatic. He wasn't cold. He was in agony. Whatever had driven him to this, money, coercion, ideology, it was tearing him apart. He was about to kill a woman he had helped raise, and it was destroying him. But he was still going to do it. That was the difference between grief and resolve. He could feel both at once. So could I. "Put it down," I said. His hand trembled. The weapon wavered. For 1 second, maybe 2, I thought he might surrender. Then his jaw tightened and his grip steadied. He chose. I fired first. The shot took him in the shoulder, his weapon arm. He spun, hit the wall, and the Vess weapon clattered across the floor. He slid down the wall, clutching his shoulder, dark fluid seeping between his fingers. Ildrethi blood, indigo, almost black. I kicked the weapon away and stood over him. He looked up at me with those amber eyes and said something in Ildrethi. I didn't understand the words, but the tone, I understood the tone. It was relief. Like some part of him had been praying someone would stop him. Station security arrived 7 minutes later. Conquered forces locked down the diplomatic wing and swept for remaining operatives. The Servethani in the observation lounge was apprehended trying to leave through a cargo bay. The Drenith was found in the lower levels with a bag full of micro-explosives and a dead man's switch he never got to activate. The fake maintenance Thessic was captured in a ventilation shaft 2 levels below the summit hall. In total, 9 Vess operatives were on the station. We had identified 6. Station security found the other 3 during the lockdown. A full 9-person assassination team, armed, positioned, and ready to execute one of the most complex political killings in recent galactic history. They had been stopped by 5 humans. The summit was delayed by 3 hours while the station was secured. When it resumed, Kalin walked into the hall flanked by me and Sable. Jenna, Yale, and Davy took positions around the perimeter. Every delegation was staring. News of the attempted assassination had spread through the station like wildfire. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone knew that the Ildrethi princess had been targeted by the Vess Syndicate, and that her human security detail had neutralized the threat. 9 professional assassins, 0 casualties on our side, 1 wounded attacker, the rest subdued and captured alive. Kalin took her seat at the negotiation table. She straightened her robes. She folded her hands, and then she looked across the table at the assembled delegations and spoke. I don't remember her exact words. The speech was in formal diplomatic Ildrethi and I only caught fragments, but I remember the effect. The room was silent. Delegates who had been skeptical of the treaty, who had been dragging their feet, who had been quietly sympathetic to the opposition, they listened. And when she finished, the Servethani delegate Koran, the one who had called us pets, stood up and formally endorsed the treaty. The others followed within the hour. The Myrth Corridor Agreement was signed that evening. Kalin's signature was the last on the document. Her hand, I noticed, did not shake. We stayed on Verth'Call for 2 more days while conquered investigators processed the scene and debriefed us. The Vess Syndicate's network on the station was dismantled piece by piece. 3 governments were implicated in the conspiracy. Diplomatic crises cascaded through half the shale expanse. Veshan survived. He was taken into Ildrethi custody. I heard later that Kalin visited him once before his trial. I don't know what they said to each other. I didn't ask. Some things are private, even from the people who protect you. On our last evening, Kalin requested to see me alone. We met in the same reception hall where we'd first been introduced, the one with the pearl walls and the color-shifting light. She was different. Not physically, she still looked like something out of a painting, luminous and composed and impossibly graceful. But the fear was gone, not just hidden, gone. In its place was something harder, something forged. She had walked through fire and come out the other side, and it showed. "Sergeant Vasek," she said. "Your Highness, I want to thank you, formally and personally. We were doing our job." She shook her head. "You were doing more than your job. I've reviewed the security logs. I know what happened in the maintenance hub. I know what happened in the corridor with Veshan." She paused. "You went alone." "Yes." "Why?" "Because if he was there, someone had to find him, and I wasn't willing to risk anyone else." "You risked yourself. That's the job." She studied me. "No," she said quietly, "that's the species." She crossed the room and did something that Ildrethi royalty, as far as I knew, never did. She took my hand, both of hers around both of mine. Her skin was cool, almost metallic and faintly luminescent. "When I return to Ildrith," she said, "I am going to tell my father what happened here. I am going to tell the council. And I am going to tell every person who will listen that humanity is not a young species fumbling through the galaxy. Humanity is a force that the galaxy has not yet learned to understand." "You give us too much credit," I said. "I give you exactly the credit you earned." She tightened her grip. "Sergeant, the Vess Syndicate has never failed. In 400 years of operations, they have never failed to eliminate a target. Do you understand what you did? You didn't just save my life. You broke a record that terrified civilizations for centuries. You showed the galaxy that there is something the Vess cannot account for." "What's that?" She released my hands and stepped back, and she smiled a real smile, warm and tired and grateful. "Humans who have decided that failure is not an option they're willing to consider." I left Verth'Call 2 days later, standard transport. Jenna slept the entire trip. Davy read technical manuals. Yale stared out the viewport with an expression that told me she was still processing everything that had happened. Sable sat beside me and said nothing for 4 hours, which was her way of saying everything. We went back to our unit, filed our reports, resumed normal duties. The galaxy kept turning. But things changed. Not immediately, not dramatically, slowly like a tide coming in. Within a month, 3 other alien governments had requested human security details for high-profile dignitaries. Within 6 months, the number was 18. Within a year, Terran diplomatic security was the most sought-after protective force in the Shale expanse. Because the story traveled, the way stories do. Not the official report. Not the dry summary filed with Terran command. The real story. The one about a frightened princess who crossed the galaxy to find protectors she could trust, and the 5 humans who walked her through fire because she asked them to. The story about Sergeant Vasic going alone down a corridor to face a man with a gun, because someone behind him needed to be safe. The story about Private Yale Ortiz, 22 years old, tackling a professional assassin at full sprint because hesitation wasn't something she could afford. The story about a team that was outnumbered, outgunned, operating blind on foreign ground and won, not through superior technology, not through tactical brilliance, through the simple, irrational, magnificent stubbornness of deciding that someone was under their protection and meaning it absolutely. The Vess Syndicate still operates. They're still feared, but they have a new rule now, one that I'm told has been added to their operational guidelines. It says, do not engage a target under human protection unless all other options have been exhausted. Human security operatives do not respond to threats with proportional force. They do not calculate acceptable losses. They do not negotiate, withdraw, or surrender. Treat any human-protected target as a maximum difficulty engagement. And there's a footnote, apparently, added by the operative who planned the Verth'Call mission, one of the 3 who was captured during the lockdown. During his interrogation, he was asked what he would have done differently. His answer was simple. I would have brought more people, many more, or better yet, I would have chosen a target that didn't have humans standing in the way. When the interrogator asked how many Vess it would take to overcome a human security detail, the operative reportedly went quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'm not sure there is a number. I still think about Kalin sometimes. I hear she's doing well. The Myrth Corridor agreement held. Trade routes opened. Ildrith prospered. The opposition faction was dismantled after the conspiracy was exposed. She's a senior diplomat now, one of the most respected voices in the Concord. She sent me a message once, years later, short, no diplomatic formalities. Just a few lines. It said, I told you that humans bond. I was right, but I didn't understand then what I understand now. You didn't just bond with me. You bonded with the idea of me, with the principle that someone who asks for help deserves to receive it. That is why you are feared, Sergeant. Not because of what you can do, because of what you refuse to stop doing. I read it 3 times, then I put it away and went back to work. Because that's what we do. We go back to work. We take the next assignment. We stand beside the next person who needs standing beside. And if someone comes for them, whether it's 1 or 9 or 90, we do the same thing we always do. We stay. That's the whole story. That's the whole secret. The galaxy spent millennia building empires and alliances and weapons and doctrines, and they couldn't figure out why humans were different, why we were feared, why the most dangerous assassins in the galaxy couldn't get past 5 soldiers on a foreign station. The answer was never complicated. We just refused to leave.